Hey guys, Drifter here. I wanted to start out today's video with a confession, a really personal, embarrassing confession that I wouldn't put in any other video, which is that I'm deeply terrified of scrolling content on social media, and I refuse to watch any of it. No TikTok, no Instagram, no YouTube Shorts. It mortifies me down to my core, and I avoid it like the plague. I think that it is literally mind poison. It's bad for everybody. It's evil and probably one of the most dangerous things that humanity has ever invented for the long-term survival of our species. And no, perhaps the content itself isn't evil. The cute dog pictures, the cute cat videos, and little informative bits and game clips, those aren't inherently bad in and of themselves. However, the companies, and especially the algorithms that the companies build to control the content and what you see, can be very, very evil. This is definitely going to be perceived as something of a boomer opinion. It's going to be like Drifter's getting so old he doesn't even like TikTok, he just can't relate to the kids, something like that. Or perhaps it'll be perceived as a personal insult to almost all of you who probably do enjoy some degree of scrolling content. Or perhaps even hypocritical, since I'm a guy who works on social media and I make a ton of videos for Twitter and 4 or 5 for TikTok every single day. So you would say, if you hate this so much, why are you participating in it? Why are you making it? Why are you doing things? And the short version is that I just have bills to pay. And looping back around to the main topic, I have watched friends and family, close, distant, near and far, people around the world just tune in to Instagram Reels, to YouTube Shorts, to TikTok, and just watch these videos all day. And I have watched so many people get their brains completely rotted or twisted or bent out of shape by social media in nearly irreversible ways. So today I'm going to tell you why I think scrolling content is evil and why I refuse to watch literally any of it. The number one reason that I avoid scrolling content is because the algorithms that recommend the content operate by neurohacking the emotional response system in your brain. And I know that sounds very sci-fi, very cyberpunk and made up, but it's very, very true. There is a reason that TikTok and YouTube Shorts and all these little companies and Instagram, they hire sociologists, psychiatrists, neuropsychiatrists, and stuff like that. Because these algorithms don't necessarily operate based on showing you good content or relevant content or content that they genuinely think that you're going to like, but rather they're trying to elicit an emotional response and get your brain to release a little bit of dopamine. That is the primary neurohacking driver mechanism behind most short-form content. Most of you are familiar with dopamine. You're probably aware that it controls the pleasure and satisfaction center of your brain, the reward center. This is normally something that you would feel after you've done something pleasurable. Maybe you've got a massage, maybe you're hugging a partner, maybe you finally finished writing that book that you always wanted to write, and you get this release of dopamine as a reward. Well, you can also get that through video games, through drugs, or through just engaging with media, be it regular movies and media, or in this case, what we're going to be focusing on, short-form content media. And you don't get to choose whether or not you release dopamine. It's not like, yeah, I like this, let's turn the dopamine switch on. Pretty much as soon as the video starts playing, your brain either does or does not release this chemical. And in the case of social media and like short form content like Instagram Reels and stuff like that, your brain makes that decision pretty quickly. And if it likes what it sees, it releases a small bit of dopamine. And you would say, so what? Why does that matter? Well, it matters because dopamine can be addictive, especially when it's being fed to you in little intervals of 1 or 2 pumps every minute or so. Your body and your brain and all of your neurochemistry starts expecting this dopamine. It starts building systems around it. And the classic example of this would be the Milner rat study, where he found a way, put a little electrical stimulation thing in the part of the brain and was able to stimulate, I think it was dopamine production through an electrical signal if the rats touched a lever. All they had to do was like press on a lever and it would give them pleasure in their brain. And you would say, well, what happened to the rats? Well, they pretty much just sat there and pumped the lever to get pleasure until they passed out or died or starved or something. I think some of them would eat the bare minimum amount that they need and then run back to the little lever and just keep pumping dopamine. And we're not talking about cocaine or heroin or hard street drugs here. We're talking about very simple chemicals that are made in your brain that can elicit that kind of response in animals. And it's not terribly different with human beings, albeit having an electrode in your brain and being on Instagram Reels are not necessarily comparable things in terms of strength, but the basic principle operates the same. This effect can be achieved with other emotions and other chemicals and other aspects of our neuropsychology as well that I am a little bit less qualified to speak on, but I can give you an example. A different example for scrolling content hijacking your emotional response system is, if you haven't noticed, occasionally it will just play you a video that seems to be designed to trigger a negative emotion, something that it knows that you're not going to like, something you're going to find repulsive, repugnant, or something like that. And then the very next video is a banger. And the reason this works is because that whatever that triggered you, let's say it's a political belief that you didn't agree with, has kind of got you in this very hyped up sort of state. And then the next video is relieving, and you come down and you feel the dopamine and it washes over you, and it's much more effective and you get a bigger hit of it. But thus it rewards the scrolling type behavior. Slowly but surely, subconsciously, you're starting to get used to it. And one of the problems with this in short form, instead of when you're completing big life projects, is that it leaves people with a feeling of being unfinished, unsatisfied. They want to keep on scrolling and they don't know why. They feel like they have to see all of it. They have to see the end of the internet perhaps. But the reality is their brain is so used to getting juiced with dopamine every couple of minutes, they keep scrolling to get that next hit, and they don't even necessarily know why. This is evil because this is not an accidental design. This didn't just happen. This isn't something they stumbled upon. There's a very good reason that these companies hire neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, neuropsychologists, and a variety of other scientists to do their research on human responses to the algorithm's recommendation. There are experts with PhDs that I cannot properly pronounce working at these companies to try to design systems to use media to sort of overwhelm your emotional response systems to make you more addicted to the app. And that is real, genuine, by design. And I think that's fundamentally evil. And some of you might say, well, so what if it's making people happy? What is the problem? The problem is that pumping dopamine this quickly and at these levels leads to several consequences. The two big ones I'll talk about right here. Firstly, it will eventually change your source of happiness to mostly being the app, like a drug and like an addiction. You will go to the app to seek your happiness, or when you do something happy, you will put it on the app and then enjoy it there. And it sort of skews your perception of reality a little bit. And on top of that, it also erodes life skills such as perseverance, dedication, resilience, satisfaction from hard work, because the same amount of dopamine that you could get from doing something really good for yourself, really hard, really difficult, you could probably also get from scrolling on TikTok for about 15 minutes. So your brain subconsciously has no desire to do any of those hard things that are essential for life. And I think that's a detriment to society as a whole. Piggybacking off of this discussion on dopamine, let's talk about what that does to people's attention spans, especially children. I think the easiest example out of everything I'm going to talk about today is the example of kids that are addicted to TikTok. Everybody that has kids, or everybody has kids in their family, or knows kids, or is a teacher, has seen the kids that just sit there and scroll constantly all day. Kids that can't even read know how to operate the app. They panic, they freak out, they go crazy when you take it away. Some of my nieces and nephews like to get 3 or 4 devices and go through all of them at the same time to overwhelm themselves with media. And what this does is that dopamine cycle that we talked about in the previous section. And when you hit it this quickly all the time, especially if this is your primary or only form of entertainment and one of your key ways to learn about the world, it ruins attention span. The psychology of this is that it just obliterates your brain's capacity to pay attention and creates a sort of pseudo ADHD is what I'll call. That's not a medical term, but you get essentially the same kind of effect. And that's one of the reasons why human attention spans has been decreasing generation after generation. Millennials have less attention span than Gen X. Gen X has less attention span than a boomer. Boomers have less attention span than the greatest generation, et cetera, because media has been accelerating. You know, the old generations had books and maybe radio. Well, now we had TV, then we had cable TV, then the internet, and now the little apps that just go like a million miles an hour while you scroll. I don't know why I do this, like you can see on the phone. But it causes less and less and less attention spans, which is why you see teachers now complaining, and this is only in the last 4 or 5 years when TikTok really blew up, that the app is ruining their children's ability to pay attention. Children get nervous, they get stressed out when they haven't been able to use the app because they're so addicted to it. As a matter of fact, an interesting study is that they started polling like teens and kids, and many of them found that videos over 1 minute were stressful. Like anything that made you focus for more than a minute or two was very, very stressful. I have a friend of mine who's a principal at a high school, and he was getting ready to write his like little graduation commencement speech thing. And he's like, man, this is too long. This is 2 minutes long. I know my kids won't pay attention to this. What we have to do is shrink it down to maybe a minute and 15 seconds, something like that. Because otherwise, we're just going to lose them and they're going to take their phones out. So this is an easy kind of boomer thing to complain about. The problem is that this doesn't get better as the kids grow up. Like as the TikTok generation gets older, it's not like they're an adult now. I don't have time to scroll on TikTok. I'll go do a job and focus in college and study hard. No. The effects get less reversible as the children get older and start turning into proper ADHD and focus and attention disorders. It gets worse over time, and the focus here has been on children, but I wanted to clarify that the exact same effects can happen to adults too. It can happen to 3-year-olds or 100-year-olds. If you use this, if you engage in it, if you let yourself get emotionally involved in it, it completely erodes your attention span. And again, that is a bad thing. You do not want to live in a world where people have a 1-minute attention span. That's like living in Idiocracy, or for my literature fans out there, it's kind of like the main character's mother from Harrison Bergeron, who is so mentally overwhelmed all the time she can't even remember what's going on more than a few minutes ago. And the primary driver behind that is scrolling content on social media such as YouTube Shorts and TikTok. The next bone I have to pick with short form content is that it increases polarization and just pulls people further and further apart into increasingly distant echo chambers. This is bad for society because politically it results in a lack of compromise, but socially it results in demonizing other groups that an algorithm has told you that you should be hating. And it does this primarily through creating echo chambers. Most of you are familiar with the concept of an echo chamber where everybody in the space is essentially agreeing with you, where there's not much competition for ideas, it's one ideology only. And the reason that the algorithms do this is because an echo chamber is a very easy way for the algorithm to validate people's beliefs, thus make them feel good about themselves, and thus release that dopamine that we talked about earlier that keeps them addicted on the cycle. And what's good about that is that validated, happy people getting their dopamine hits daily because they're in an echo chamber of like-minded individuals will keep coming back for more again and again and again and again. And it's very profitable because every time they come back, that's just more money for the company, more ads to be run, more monthly active users, more of whatever it is that that company's goals are. And the problem with this is that it increases people's differences between each other. It leads to very little compromise. And in the echo chamber itself, you'll find almost no real disagreement or discourse. Most of you that watch news or political content on short form media and even on long form here, like on YouTube, are probably in an echo chamber, even if it's a soft echo chamber, because that's where the algorithm wants you to be. That's where it tries its hardest to put you. And the only time that you will likely see content that challenges your beliefs is it likes to throw you these bones earlier, like we talked about the negative emotional response. It'll show you something short, something that it knows that you're gonna see, but maybe not watch a whole lot of, the opposite of what you are, the opposite group, the opposite political or religious belief. And you get that emotional response so that the very next piece of content is the validating response and the dopamine again. And what this results in is primarily demonization of outgroups, which is extremely dangerous. That leads to hate and violence and all the various weird protests and things you see in the United States. And I just think it's awful. I really hate how social media polarizes us. And I feel that at a macro level, it ruins discourse and makes it more difficult for people to compromise with one another because their primary media form is extreme and it's been telling them not to. Part of the process of creating an effective echo chamber is supplying the user with an identity. It may be one that they didn't have before, but one that the algorithm thinks that they might take. The algorithms try their best to try to get you involved in communities because it boosts engagement, it's more likely to get you in the echo chamber, and it's more likely to make you feel like you're doing something, even if you, the user, perhaps didn't have any particular attachment or affiliation to this group in the past. Repeated exposure over months or years, sometimes 1 or 2 subtle little videos at a time, can just pull you in and make some of the things you watch a part of your core identity. This is something you'll learn about if you take like a media class. The media that you watch ultimately does shape you as a person, and short form content is no different than watching violent movies or watching the Barbie movie or whatever it is that you're into. This tactic works very well because many people these days lack a strong core identity, and most of us psychologically crave having an identity. Most of us desire to be part of a group, part of a family, part of some sort of greater function than ourselves. And in the distant past, this would have been family. In the less distant past, this probably would have been religious institutions. I am Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or something like that. And then in the more secular ages, the psychologists would say we killed God and replaced them with science. So initially, there was a great amount of trust in institutions of science, of technological development, of great minds and things like that. But over years and many failings and corruptions later, the institutions have also fallen. So people don't have strong family units, strong religious attachments, or strong institutions. So tons of people turn to social media to try to seek out that core identity. And one of the easiest ways this happens is they start just scrolling content, and it'll just throw you these little weird zingers here and there just to kind of see how you interact with different things. But what it's really doing is sizing you up so that it can start trying to pick some sort of identity to show you and supply you over time to make you part of a group, to keep you coming back and keep you clicking ads and spending money and stuff like that. It does lead to a problem of some people thinking that they're doing activism or doing something good by sharing or liking or engaging with content in some kind of way, when they're really sitting at home doing nothing with absolute slacktivism. One of the easy examples of being supplied an identity is Andrew Tate, very unpleasant individual that I could do a whole video criticizing, but that's not the point for today. His audience is impressionable teenagers, often without father figures. They don't have strong religious attachments, they don't believe in the school that they're in, their family unit is structured, and the algorithm can supply them with this guide that will initially start teaching them things like lift weights, go to the gym, eat meat, stuff like that, be confident in yourself, but then later just move into this whole different like weird manosphere community of stuff that, God, it's depressing there. I don't want to really get involved with that. But that's kind of how the process works. There's a reason that Andrew Tate fans are fatherless teenagers, and there's a reason that alternative medicine practitioners on YouTube are usually older women without children. Obviously, picking the Andrew Tate group is an example of a bad one. Some of these are more innocuous, anime, certain games, and stuff like that. But some of them start as something good and turn into something nasty. For example, the fat acceptance movement, a lot of larger teenagers will start getting into. And for reference and clarity here, I think it is awful to make fun of people for being fat, and I think that we should treat people better, and that fat doesn't necessarily have to be unhealthy. It just probably is. But what ultimately happens is the algorithms just turbo boost this more and more and more until it turns into a movement and then a community, and then it turns into self-harm with people eating and feeding themselves and not having a good perspective of their bodies and things like that. There's even worse than that is the mental illness as a personality group, the self-diagnosing. I have autism. I really want to have multiple personality disorder. I'm a psychopath. I'm only attracted to psychopaths sometimes you see in young people. There's various gender-based hate groups, and I'm not just talking about trans and drag queen stuff. I'm talking about awful, nasty groups of like, there's like MGTOW, men going their own way, and there's like 5 different female equivalents of just a bunch of very nasty women that are just blah, 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 kill men all day. We already mentioned alternative medicine practitioners. That's a whole demographic. And we haven't even touched on politics, religions, sports teams, very obvious stuff like that. But all of these groups are more popular and bigger now than they have ever been before because social media and especially short form content turbocharges them by trying to identify you as a user and putting you into a bucket, into a community that is easily monetizable. Now, for younger viewers especially, and it applies to adults too, this does tend to skew people's not just identity, but also their self-worth. They will compare themselves to the best influencers they follow. They will want to aspire to be like those people, and when they fail, because there's an element of luck in this stupid social media Ponzi scheme style job, they tend to be really hard on themselves. So there's a lot of problems here with algorithms trying to supply identities, and I'm going to back up one more time, and I will tell you a personal story of mine. My YouTube recommendations have tried so hard for like the last year to get me on red pill stuff. Like, it has showed me endless political content, endless Joe Rogan, endless Andrew Tate videos, and it does not matter how many times I don't like, not interested, don't show me this, downvote, thumbs down, block. It just comes back again and recycles because the algorithm knows that I am just the right demographic to get pulled into this. And once I do, I'll come back all the time and watch 10 times more YouTube than I used to. So no matter how hard I try to disengage from this, even making burner accounts sometimes, the very moment it collects enough information about me to pick the most probable identity demographic to put me into, it just starts showing me Jordan Peterson videos again. So that's very, very frustrating. We're gonna be moving much faster in the back half of the video. Reason number 5 that I dislike scrolling short form content is that it reduces complexity of information, sometimes in very bad ways, and thus makes discourse more difficult. As a guy who literally makes 3 to 4 news videos a day, where I have to take a very long article and make it just small enough for people to learn about in a minute or two, which is still considered quite long for social media these days, it's necessary. It's necessary for the content to fit the medium if you want to talk about something like that. So I am guilty of this too, and it's something that I try to do very carefully, very precisely. I try to read, I try to, use all those skills I developed in college and English literature class and make the best summary possible. But not everybody does that. Some people just read the headlines, some people just listen to others on TikTok or social media, and some people just don't care and crank out content as fast as possible. The discourse in short form content is similarly truncated and kind of relies on reductivist arguments, which is to reduce something down to its simplest form. And the best example of that would be the snow is white example. I think we would all agree that snow is white, unless it's not, unless it's got something dirty mixed into it, or if you want to talk about snow is made out of a collection of atoms that are technically clear and see-through, but the whiteness has to do with the crystallization structure. Well, is it really white, or is it just reflecting light differently? Or do the atoms even have colors? And you go down at this sort of rabbit hole, and it seems it's almost like a child asking why, but the reality is on social media, you never get beyond the first layer of why. It's just the most simple version, often made worse by political goals. This is something I see a lot in political social media, is that people that have some sort of goal to achieve try to take something that's pretty complex and burn it down to some very simple binary kind of statement. In my opinion, this is the favorite tool of the pseudo-intellectual. It's both jargonistic and jingoistic, so I try to avoid that when I see it. And because of all of this, real learning, and especially because of the attention span problem we mentioned before, real learning is often lost in the process of shortening content. It makes the educational value worse and the style worse. It just takes out all of the good stuff and leaves only room for very simple little binary facts. The number 6 for today is kind of piggybacking off of number 5. When you reduce complexity like this, and with the issues that I talked about before with polarization and otherization of different groups, you ultimately reduce empathy between people and minimize discourse. You would think that people on the internet would have an opportunity to have discourse and communicate with each other better than we ever have in the past before, but since short form content is probably the dominant content form these days, at least in terms of view time and numbers, that ability to have discourse has been made less. And similarly, the ability to empathize with other groups and other people that are different than you has been minimized thanks to the algorithms pumping that sort of negative response and then positive dopamine hit cycle over and over and over again, which just makes everything in the world worse. And then finally, here at the end, you can tell we're moving through these quickly because I've rambled way too much in today's video. These little apps completely ruin privacy. Phone apps, pretty much all of them spy on you all of the time. We like to, poke fun at TikTok and Meta for being really bad about our information. But the reality is that Google is no better. Microsoft is no better. A lot of the big ad agencies aren't any better. Twitter in the past was better only because it was so simple that it couldn't spy on you very effectively. So the more we use these, the more we give up our privacy. And most adults that I talk to have absolutely no clue what privacy is, why it's valuable, why they shouldn't give it up with apps, or really even what the apps are taking from them and what they can learn and what they can do with that information. Most adults either do not know or do not care. They kind of look at me like I'm a bad person when I start telling them, hey, maybe that's not safe, or this spies on you, or blah, blah. I just get kind of irritated. Kids have even less of an idea. Children have no clue about all of that. And almost all of these apps, even in the EU, where they blah, blah, blah about data rights and protecting children and blah, 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 all of these apps absolutely 100% collect information about children that are using them that are too young to read, too young to consent, and they're just building a lifetime marketing profile for these people because it'll be profitable later, which is very scary to me. I think all of these are bad things. For those of you that have made it to the end of this very long video, I hope that you would now agree that short-form scrolling content is not good for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And that's why I avoid it. And one of the things that comes to mind when I think about this topic is colonization. In the 1800s and 1700s and even early 1900s, there was a land rush to grab as much land as you can and then as much resources as you can. And then we were rapidly trying to lock down rare earth minerals, oil, rights to the seas, rights to the moon and space. But corporations have found that there is an infinite landscape that has yet to be colonized. Your brain. So TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, all of these different companies, even Twitch and gaming companies, what they're really jockeying for, what they're really competing for is your brain space, both your processing power that you would use to enjoy the content and play the games and stuff, and your time, but also your opinions, your attitudes, your purchasing habits, your flow and interactions into the world. It's all desired to be colonized, mapped, and controlled. So since we ran out of land, we just started taking mines, is my opinion on this. So I try to just completely opt myself out of that system. I avoid short form content. I don't watch hardly any of it. Sometimes people show me things and that's whatever, but I don't sit there and doom scroll all day because I know it'll ruin my mind. So then at the end of the video, what is the solution to all of this? How do we fight back? Well, first of all, what I just said, don't watch scrolling content at all. That's the best way to do it. I say as I shoot myself in the foot as I'm dependent on scrolling content for my job. I think it would be good for everybody to take a media literacy class on propaganda, or at least a literature class on propaganda. It's something that should be basic in high school. In my high school, they worked really hard to teach us about propaganda, how to identify fake news and stuff like that. I think taking a debate class to learn about logical fallacies and argumentative techniques is extremely valuable, because then you will immediately spot people using bad arguments and weak techniques and stuff like that. And personally, when I'm reading stuff that's educational and not just funny, I always try to chase down source articles or source videos of an event. The long video with all the context, the court documents, the official press release, the whatever, always, always, always is that going to be better than an article that somebody else wrote or summarized or offered an opinion on. And then finally, the most difficult thing, which astonishingly few people are capable of doing, nor do they have a desire to do, is to be aware of your own biases. I don't have an exactly good way to tell you how to do this. This might take therapy for some people. This might take classes. This might take meditation, introspection, something. But you need to be aware of how your brain works, what your biases are, and also what your prejudices are. And that doesn't even have to be in the racial term. I just really don't like chocolate ice cream, for example. That's a prejudice. So anything about chocolate ice cream, I'm immediately somewhat negative about. But it takes a certain degree of introspection to do that a great number of people find both difficult and painful to do. And unfortunately, this is a little doom and gloom here at the end, almost nobody does any of these things at all. Very, very few people have I ever met that decided, hey, maybe doom scrolling on Instagram all day isn't good for my mental health. I have met very few people that have taken media literacy classes. I've met very few people that have been interested in debate or argumentative techniques. And the big one is, I might be the only person that I know that reads source documents or court cases and stuff like that instead of news articles. I feel like an alien in that regard. So I don't think a lot of people are going to change their habits or behaviors based on a YouTube video. I'm pretty sure that in practical terms here in the real world, we've already crossed the Rubicon on social media and short form content, neurohacking and stuff like that. And there's no going back. And I kind of was a part of that. I was here in the early days of YouTube. I've done short content and streams. I've experimented with almost every type of media there is, except for I've been on podcasts, so I've done podcasts too. And I do feel a little bit guilty. I feel a little bit bad that at least in some small way, the things that I've created have contributed to this problem. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep making content to pay my bills, and I am going to try to be the good version. I am going to try my best to give everybody the most factual, most fun, least biased information, to be very mindful of what I'm putting out and the impact it would have on what at least was a younger demographic of audience, now primarily college students, and just try to be the good guy on the internet, because getting people to quit TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts just isn't going to happen. And also nobody's going to read 200-page court cases. So I just have to try to be better than everybody else, I guess. That's so weird. I don't mean the audience. I mean the people I compete with making videos. You can see that this topic is frustrating. So guys, that is all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. And if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.